Welcome back to Business Focus. This week we're going to be focusing on Cambridge Ahead, the business and academic member group that's dedicated to ensuring the successful growth of Cambridge and of course of its region in the long term. We have the pleasure of having here as our guest today Jane Paterson-Todd, CEO of Cambridge Ahead. Jane, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Jane, tell us a bit about Cambridge Ahead. It's a very diverse, eclectic group of members. How did it come about and what draws everyone together? Sorry.
Interesting. If you look at the economy and if you look at any big city, it's really important that business has a say in the way that it is conducted. It's because of business rates, generally speaking, which government benefits from because of taxation. And business is there for the long term. Cambridge as a city is growing so rapidly. I mean, you're looking at something like over 7.7% growth rates in organisations that are born and bred in Cambridge. And that's grown 26% in employment in the last 4 years. I mean, in terms of the way that this is growing, it's just off the page. And business is causing that situation, frankly, because it is, of course, it's business related in terms of the way that it's growing and turnover and employment, etc. And it was just felt by large-scale businesses that they wanted to have more of a say about the way that local government decisions are made. And that's not to say to take it out of the hands of the councils, because they do a tremendous job and we absolutely understand that, but to have much more of a support and understanding of it, so that therefore by bringing business into the inner room to understand exactly what those decisions are, helps us to understand what we need to be doing for the long-term growth of Cambridge and infrastructure development and housing, particularly where there is such a shortage in housing, and also in things like road building and rail use, etc. So, that's why Cambridge Ahead came into being 4 years ago, was to help support local government in its decision making and get business really behind it and having the power of its influence where necessary.
Because it's really important for business to be understood and to give its input in terms of policy making, because if the policy affects businesses and is expected to nurture and grow and encourage business growth, that expertise is really key.
Yeah. If you think about, not only is it in local government obviously having a relationship with central government, but certainly so do business leaders. And so to have them having the opportunity to support local decision making, to put their viewpoint forward, to think down the road. We don't just think in 5-year cycles, which is what, fundamentally that's what a government cycle is. We think 25 years down the line. What's Cambridge going to look like? Let's have a look at what's going on at the moment. We've just talked about 7.7% growth in company growth. We've just talked about the fact that this is an economy that is growing faster than most cities in the UK. It's a net contributor to this country. It's going to be doing even better as time goes on. But to do that, it needs to actually sort out some fundamental issues. Our housing, for instance, is now on a par in price as London. That's, 16 times the amount of salary it is to buy a house in Cambridge. That's exactly the same as it is in London. What we're doing, we're driving people away. Not only is housing becoming unaffordable, but people can't even get into Cambridge as well as they were able to before, because there isn't enough rail services, so timetabling needs to be looked at. There isn't enough in terms of, road capacity. And road capacity, even if you build more roads, runs out of roads because everyone wants to get in their cars. So we need to really sort out two issues: sorting out our infrastructure, sorting out our housing crisis, amongst other things that we're also working on.
It's really interesting because they're not specifically business related issues, in the sense that they're not tax breaks or public funding for technology or innovation, but they massively affect business development in Cambridge because Cambridge is doing so well and because it needs to be able to continue in that growth cycle.
I mean, if you look at it in its much more holistic sense, you'd expect business to be thinking about, supply and demand in its business, but supply and demand also is is something fundamental to the housing market. So the number of houses that we build and the demand that causes, if employment is growing, if population is growing, if businesses are going to come into this environment, we need to ensure that they can say, all right, where are my staff going to live? Is it affordable for them to live in this environment? How are they going to get into work? What's the sort of commuting patterns like? Is that actually sustainable? And if you want to continue with a growth city to have the inward investment that it requires, then you need to be able to answer those questions. And so to answer those questions, it's fundamentally important that you don't just think about your business, but you're thinking about quality of life. You're thinking about place. And those are things that are fundamental to people if they're thinking about if they're going to invest in an area, because it's not just about intelligence within a sector that you're involved in, that you're looking for. It's about also looking at all these other aspects that actually make decision-making either possible or impossible. And so that's why it's actually vastly important to us.
Now, Cambridge Ahead has a very special vision. Its vision is to become the leading preeminent small city in the world. Small town in the world or small city in the world?
Oh, small city.
Small city. Where does that vision come from? What does it mean? And how does Cambridge Ahead plan to achieve it? Or has it already?
Right. Well, I think two things that we've just been discussing sort of tells us that we probably haven't achieved it as yet. You know, we need to sort out these two fundamental infrastructure issues before we can say that we are the preeminent small city in the world. But like all visions, you know, they are aspirational. That's what we're trying to look for. That's what we want to try and achieve. That's what we'd like to do in the long term. What is a small city? Well, let's firstly understand that we say small because we're not trying to grow this into some unsustainable mass city. We recognise that this is a small city. We recognise that that is vastly important. It's a historical city with a centre which is steeped in 800 years of university history, for a start. On top of that, we've got a growing economy, but we don't want to grow to such a point that you end up being the London of the East. But we are a growing economy, and we want to grow it in what we'd see as one as an elegant way, but also making sure that we talk about all forms of demographics actually being able to access Cambridge. So it's not just looking at the top end and tiers of the demographic profile, it's also looking at all of the other ones and making sure that this sort of city has something for everyone. And when you become a preeminent small city, what are you looking for? You want to come back to people, quality of space, entertainment, enjoyment, somewhere where you can school your children, somewhere where you have a lovely place to live, somewhere where you can get in and out of that city very easily, somewhere where you're really well connected in this fast-growing technological environment that we work in. And it's bringing all those ingredients together that makes it such a vibrant city, and we want to do that. And so it's working on those key issues: transport, housing, skills and education for everyone, so that businesses can employ people at all levels, and the skills are there, from looking at people that are apprenticeships right up to people with degree levels in certain careers, paths that they want to take. But making sure that actually all of those ingredients work really well together, and so that we can be an exemplar in this world, that people say, I want to invest in Cambridge.
We've heard a lot about Case for Cambridge recently, also in the context of devolution. Would you care to tell us a bit about that, about Cambridge Ahead's position?
Right. So I think for us, what's important is to look at devolution's a very good idea. I mean, devolving powers to local governments so they can make decisions. One that immediately says this is going to be a faster making process. Absolutely 100%, we agree with that. What we see as being an opportunity at the moment, and looking at devolution for the East, so that government is talking about a powerhouse of the East, as has happened in the powerhouse of the North. We also believe that there is a good idea behind looking at this area and saying, how could this be devolved? I think what we need to know is understand a lot more on what's on the table in terms of devolution, because this is a huge geography. And there is talk, of course, of having a mayor across this huge geography. And I think we've all got to be realistic about, if you did have a mayor for the East, is this area really too wide for one mayor to be able to govern over? And governance of this is going to be very important. It's a question. We're not saying that we don't think it's a good idea. We want to understand more how that would operate. The other part of it is looking at, would it be impossible for them to think about two mayors, so that you can have two mayors for the east residing over smaller areas with much more reasonable time between different areas that that particular mayor needs to get to, so that it's not too wild and unyielding. And I think our concern on that is that, you know, this needs a little bit more detail before we actually decide which one is going to be better for Cambridge. We absolutely recognise, you know, looking towards the east, towards Norfolk and Suffolk, these are neighbours of Cambridge. You know, working alongside them, there are labour movements that we want to see, better labour movements working between Norfolk, Suffolk and Cambridgeshire. But what about Essex and Hertfordshire? We have a very close connection with them too. We have a very close connection with London. How does this all meet together? And if you're looking at this other structure of governance coming in, are we adding another tier of governance to already a complicated or complex structure that's already in existence? And I suppose business is just saying, let's talk about this in more detail, let's put it round the table, let's understand it more so that we can actually think what's best for Cambridgeshire and for its neighbours. And it's working towards that. But we've got some time on that, and that's what we hope to do.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been really interesting talking to you and hearing about Cambridge Ahead and its initiatives. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Lana. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us again on Business Focus. We look forward to seeing you again next week.